Welcome back to another episode of the Untitled Football Podcast. Today we're here to talk about week number 2, a preview of week 2 of the NFL. Week 1 is in the books. And, let's get right into it. Starting off with Thursday night, Bengals versus the Browns. Ohio, of course, because both teams are Ohio teams. Both of these teams are relatively bad. After week 1, I think the Browns are way more depressing than the Bengals. But, both teams are, bottom tier of the league in terms of EPA per play on offense. For number 1 overall pick versus number 1 overall pick, this ain't looking too hot right now. With no win probability filters on, the Bengals were 31st in EPA per play, and the Browns were 30th. So, it's not looking too nice right now. This might be a bad game. Like a really bad game. For number 1 overall pick versus number 1 overall, Joe Burrow was a bit more encouraging than Baker Mayfield last week at least, but then again, both defenses are pretty tough though. The Chargers have a pretty good secondary. Ravens are a really good overall defense. Both teams did play some good defenses in week 1, but neither of them really put up stellar performances. Especially Baker Mayfield, he looked terrible. At least Burrow did something to make you hope, and then he also did something to make you scratch your head with that interception of Melvin Ingram. But looking at how these two teams match up against each other, it could be a close game, but maybe relatively low scoring. But I don't know. Because the Bengals defense isn't that great on paper, though it performed well. Even though I was always higher on their defense. I liked some of the pieces they had. William Jackson, who at one point in time was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL for a season in 2017. He was phenomenal that year. But other than that season, he hasn't been too great. But he matches up relatively well with Odell Beckham. They have Geno Atkins on the D-line, all that type of stuff. Their defense performed pretty well yesterday, and so did Cleveland. I was about to call them Baltimore. So did Cleveland versus Baltimore, and because the D-line kind of got after it. It didn't matter because Lamar Jackson was great, but Lamar Jackson was pressured the second highest percentage of any quarterback in the NFL, but it didn't really matter because on the back end, Cleveland didn't cover too well. So that's one thing that happens when you don't have a good coverage unit. You can pressure the quarterback at one of the highest rates in the NFL, but even still, if your cornerbacks aren't playing well, it's not going to go well. Now, I'm pretty high on the Browns group. Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward, but I think Greedy Williams is out though. I don't even think he played, but both of these teams are. I don't know, because it is a small sample size of the Bengals, so we actually don't know how good they are, and I think they might realize their offensive line sucks, or they should. So maybe next week we see a bit more, maybe protecting. I don't know if it's protecting them in health wise, because that offensive line was god awful, and they keep on going to these 5-man protection schemes, which don't work when you have a bottom tier offensive line. So Joe Burrow just did not look comfortable. So what they should probably do against a pretty good Cleveland Browns pass rush is, try to mitigate the effects of that by getting the ball out quick, booting him out, running play action, kind of like the stuff McVay did versus Dallas. The Browns pass rush might have been a little bit elevated by the fact that Lamar Jackson had a 2.8 snap to pass that game, but you still have the guys up front to make it work. Ogunjobi, he was great. Myles Garrett's amazing. Olivier Vernon's pretty underrated, even though relative to his contract, he's pretty overrated. But as a player on field, he's pretty underrated. Like, they have the guys up front to have a good pass rush week to week. But last week, it was aided by Lamar Jackson having the second highest time to throw, snap to pass that week. But both defenses should be fine. I mean, I don't know. I'm probably going to go with... Damn, this is tough. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns this week. Oh, I forgot to talk about the spread and shit. Hold on. Let me get that up. But I... Dang. I think I want to go with the Browns, but I'm not confident about either of these two teams. I'm not, like, it could really go either way. I think both of these teams, I don't know. Browns are 6-point favorites at home, even though it doesn't matter because they don't have fans in the stadium, but oh, man. I think the Bengals are a pretty good bet. Damn. Oh, man. I don't know. I'm going to go with Cleveland. I think that they have a slight of a bounce-back performance. And, oh, damn, I don't know. This is a toss-up. This is really a toss-up. I'm not going to pick either. I'm not going to pick this game, man. This game is an actual toss-up. So, yeah. That's this game. Let's go on to the next game with the Bears versus the Giants. And I went on way too long for two teams that are pretty bad. I'm going to try to make this one a bit quicker because I think both of these teams are still bad. Bears made a pretty good comeback versus the Detroit Lions last week. And Trubisky even still didn't even play that well. And Daniel Jones is actually had a pretty solid game yesterday. Like, besides throwing the ball to TJ Watt, which, like, isn't necessarily, like I said, it probably isn't necessarily his fault. Like, he didn't really know TJ Watt was going to drop back from the defensive line into coverage, which, even still, that's a deflection, like, half the time. But still, it's a pass that, you don't want to throw the ball to defenders because throwing the ball to defenders maximizes your chance of throwing an interception. As we all know. Which Daniel Jones did a lot last year. The second one was more his fault. He didn't really have to put that in the air. But, and then it was picked off by Cam Hayward. 2 interceptions for Daniel Jones on the season. 2 interceptions to defensive linemen on the season. Which is interesting. But, I mean, this game is, I don't know. This game is, you know what? I mean, okay, the Bears have a pretty solid defense. Not better than the Steelers. But the Steelers' pass rush was phenomenal last week, and defensive line was phenomenal. And, I mean, it was also aided by the fact that the Giants were hell-bent on running the ball, even though Saquon had, like, a negative per carry. And even still, like, yeah, but they insisted on running the ball, even though Saquon had a negative yards per carry. So, I mean, that doesn't make sense, but, and then they left a lot of the table in terms of fourth downs. I'm going to go with, I was going to say the better quarterback, but I don't know if it's definitively Daniel Jones. But I like what the Giants have from a weapons standpoint. Like, I still think their secondary is pretty bad, but James Bradbury played okay. I mean, he had 2 pass breakups, but he also allowed like 70 yards on 2 targets. So I thought the Giants had the worst group of corners coming into the year, and I mean, that probably still holds relatively true. They might not have the worst group, but they have one of the worst groups in the NFL. I'm going to go with the Giants to upset the Bears here because why not? Bears are 5.5-point favorites. I don't think these teams are too far. They're similarly, well, not similarly built. I think the Bears have a much better defense with Jalen Johnson bursting onto the scene, hitting the ground running, and then getting run over. But other than that play where he got trucked by Marvin Jones, he had a really good game. 2 pass breakups, 33% completion rate allowed on 6 targets, 40 yards allowed. Like, he had a pretty solid game against I would say underrated Lions receiver core, but Kenny Golladay wasn't there, and he might not be there again. But I'm gonna go with an upset, and I'm gonna go with the New York Giants over the Chicago Bears. Eagles versus Rams. The Eagles were terrible last week, but I don't think that's gonna stop me from probably picking them this game. I don't know, because the Rams were fine last week. Like, it's not like they did anything. Like, damn. But the Eagles were terrible last week. The Washington pass rush was in his face all game. Well, most of the game. He was pressured the 5th highest rate in the NFL this past week. And at the same time, it's not like he was hitting throws. Like, he wasn't hitting open throws. So, when he was in clean pockets. So, you can't just chalk it up to the pass rush. He himself, independently, was actually terrible last week. And even still, they got off pretty unlucky with a drop pass by Zach Ertz that would have won the game. Carson Wentz had the 27th, was 27th in adjusted completion percentage from a clean pocket, which, that's not good. He was never the most accurate quarterback, but this was like Josh Allen today. Last week. He was like Josh Allen. He was terrible. He really couldn't complete a pass to save his life. Right now, the Eagles, as it stands, have like the second, the lowest or second lowest EPA per play on offense. Now, yeah, they had the 32nd EPA per play on offense, if I don't put any filters on. And then they have like the the 4th highest on defense in terms of EPA allowed. So I think both of those will probably regress towards the mean. Like, I didn't think the Eagles' defense would be that great. I didn't think the offense would be the worst in the league either. Like, I didn't think Carson Wentz was going to come out and play absolutely, atrocious. So, yeah, the Rams are 1 point favorites. You can get them at 1.5, as high as 1.5. I'm gonna go with the Eagles here, which is an upset according to the spread. What they did last week was not encouraging at all for Eagles fans. That was fucking terrible. But it's not like the Rams. Like, the Rams won the game, and they made some coaching errors from a 4th down perspective, where they punted the ball back to the Cowboys and gave them a chance to win the game. Or that might not have been that. That might have been the possession before, but I don't know. How much is booting Jared Goff out almost every snap and having a 2 A-dot gonna work every game? I don't think that's gonna work every game. They're protecting Jared Goff in every way, shape, or form, imaginable. So, if they go down and they have to let Jared Goff do some drop back passing, then if they have to let Jared Goff do some true drop back passing, then they could be in a very bad way. But that might not even happen if the Eagles play like they did last week. The Eagles were disgusting. Damn. Robert Woods was amazing. Getting a ton of targets, so that's encouraging for a Robert Woods fantasy owner and myself. But he didn't even get them. He only had 6 targets. It felt like he also had 100 yards. So maybe that's what it felt like. He had more. He was a rack monster. They weren't throwing the ball anywhere, down the field. Jared Goff was very, very, very protected this game. And the Eagles, like I don't think that that performance is really indicative of how the Eagles are. So I'm gonna go with the Eagles this game. I might like if they play like they did if they play like they did against Washington this week, then the Eagles might be terrible. I'm gonna go with Philly. I'm gonna go with Philly here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Philly here. So should I even go with Philly? What they did last week was so unencouraging. I don't even know if I don't know if I really want to bet on them. I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna go with Philly over the. I'm gonna go with Philly over Los Angeles this week, and then I'm gonna go to the next game: Dallas versus Atlanta. Dallas had an odd game last week in terms of I mean, they only scored 17 points. I sort of expected their offense to be a bit better than that. But at the same time, I didn't expect it to be too much different than it was last year. Like they're like what 15th in EPA per play right now. Definitely expected them to be better. They're 20th in EPA per play on offense. I definitely expected them to be better. Atlanta, on the other hand, just got dealt by the Seahawks, who came out and let Russ cook. Atlanta, I don't know. I think this game could be pretty high scoring. Both teams have weapons, and both teams have pretty bad defenses. So, like, this could be a fireworks show. The Cowboys are 4.5-point favorites at home. Not like it really matters, but 4.5-point favorites over Atlanta, and the total is 52.5. Or I mean, you could get it up as high as 53, and as low as 51.5. So I think this game is going to be high scoring because both teams have bad defenses, and the Falcons have a bad defense too. But both teams have weapons. Like Russell Gage showed that he might be a competent third option. He had like 100 yards last game, didn't he? Like all their receivers had 100+ yard games. Yeah, Russell Gage had 114 yards. So like maybe he's showing he's a competent third option, and I sort of liked what he could do in terms of a route running standpoint. Like he does have some moves. Like he does have some pretty good route running ability. Same with Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. Like this could be a pretty good group if Russell Gage proves that this isn't an anomaly and he's a pretty damn good receiver next week. But I kind of like what he can do from a route running standpoint at least. Like both of these teams have bad defenses, but if I had to choose one to kind of like be a bit better, it would probably be Dallas because even their pass rush wasn't as advertised. But at the same time, it's not like the Rams did everything in their power to mitigate their pass rush with play action, booting Jared Goff out, a whole bunch of motion, all that type of stuff. Like they tried to mitigate the effects of the Dallas pass rush. So Atlanta probably won't do that. But at the same time, I think Matt Ryan and the weapons Atlanta has are better than what the Rams have. And if they just let Matt Ryan go out and throw, he could torch the secondary, which is pretty bad. So, but at the same time, like Dak could do the same. Like it's not like Atlanta has good players in the secondary. I mean, they have Deion Jones, who's a really good coverage linebacker, but that's about it in terms of their good players in the secondary. Like I liked AJ Terrell as a draft pick, maybe a bit too rich for my blood where they got him, but he was bad in week 1. 100 yards allowed, a touchdown. No pass breakups, 100 completion percentage allowed. He wasn't He wasn't great. To put it lightly, he wasn't great. So, to put it bluntly, he wasn't great. Like this team in the secondary is terrible, which could have, like I said, attributed to why the Seahawks went out and passed the ball, but I've heard reports that they might revert back to the old Seahawks. Saddening. Something in me really wants to go Atlanta. This would be like 3 upsets already. Man. Uh, damn. I see a way that both teams could win, and that way that both teams could win is both teams are great on offense, and neither of these teams can cover a soul. So I think it'd be high scoring, but because I don't think any team has anybody that can match up with either people on the other end. Falcons don't have anyone that can match up with like Amari Cooper, Gallup, or Lamb, and probably the same with Dallas with Julio and Ridley. So I think this game could be a pretty high scoring game. Dallas, they could have won that game. Probably should have, but the Rams did leave a lot on the table from a fourth down aggressiveness standpoint, and Dallas maybe got over aggressive. As I don't disagree with what they did, like I said in the review of Week 1, but at the point on the field they were at with the score and time, it was probably a 50-50 proposition whether you should go for it or not, and they went hyper aggressive with it. So maybe they come out on the conservative end, which could cost them this game, even though Dan Quinn is a pretty conservative coach when it comes to fourth down stuff. So, yeah, Dallas was a bit over aggressive running the ball too. They probably should have ran the ball less than they did. Like Zeke was running at 3.3 per carry for most of the game, and they kept feeding him. So, but then again, they have to justify the fact that they fucked up and gave him $90 million. So, oh man. Damn, something really wants me to go with Atlanta here. Something makes me really want to go with Atlanta. Just because I think that Atlanta's weapons are better, and I think neutral field, everything neutral, I think Dallas' defense is a bit better, but everything neutral, I think that Matt Ryan's a better, damn, why does that keep happening? I think Matt Ryan's a better quarterback than Dak Prescott in a situation where both of them are going to be heavily reliant on the quarterback dropping back and making throws. So, I don't know. This game is probably a toss-up, too. I don't want to go Atlanta because Atlanta always disappoints when you expect something from them. Damn. This is a tough pick. I think... You know what? I'm gonna go with Atlanta. Another upset for this week. I'm gonna go with Atlanta. Atlanta lost to Seattle. Pretty handily, but the Cowboys lost to the Rams, who I didn't think were really good at all coming into the season. So, they have a good roster. I just didn't think Jared Goff was that great. So I'm maybe. Damn, this game is a toss-up. This game is really a toss-up. I'm just gonna leave it at that. If you're looking to bet games, I don't think I'd bet this one because I don't know though. I think the Falcons are a pretty good bet. I think there is a high probability they could win, but I'm getting great odds on that. So, This game is a toss-up. I'm just going to leave it at that. So the next game, Panthers versus the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, they have this perception that they were terrible last game. Brady wasn't great, but even so, they are 9.5-point favorites. I don't know if I want to spend too much time on this. The Panthers, they scored 30 points against a Raiders team that can't cover. This Buccaneers defense is far superior to that defense, but I don't know, man. The Buccaneers were, they were okay, but the Saints have a pretty good coverage unit. Mike Evans was banged up, which probably helped the Saints coverage unit because Mike Evans wasn't fully healthy. So, make a long story short, I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should smash the Panthers because the Panthers aren't that good of a football team. Even though I'm higher on them than most people, they're still not an elite team. I just think Teddy Bridgewater's a quarterback that's gonna keep some games close. This game should be a slaughter. If it's not, then the Bucks have some really big problems on their hands. But even still, I don't know, because it's like people must have expected the Buccaneers, like I said, to come down. Like I said in the other video, people must have expected the Buccaneers to come and hit the ground running, which was what was just like outright unrealistic to think when a different quarterback is coming in for being entrenched in a different system for 20 years. So, but I think it should look much better this week against Carolina, who really can't cover at all. So I'm gonna go with the Panthers. Long story short, and they should probably win by a lot. Tom Brady should look pretty good. Then I need him to for my fantasy team. I have him on almost all of them, and he even still with 2 interceptions last week, he was like the 8th highest scoring fantasy quarterback. So, like, if you were starting your league now, I'd still get that late round value with Tom Brady because now people are probably fading him hard. So, yeah. I'm going to go with Tampa Bay to beat the shit out of the Panthers most likely. So, yeah. Next game, we're going on to Jets versus 49ers. I could get this game done in 30 seconds. Me, that probably won't happen. The Jets look disgusting. The 49ers also still didn't look great, but like they had a ton of injuries, which are still a thing. So how good are the Niners gonna be then? I don't know. I'm gonna go with the Niners off the rip because the Jets might be the worst team in the NFL. 49ers are 7-point favorites. I don't know. Like, they should be better against... They might not necessarily play all that well and still beat the hell out of the Jets because the Jets are terrible. So, yeah, this is a bounce-back game for the 49ers. You might see the Niners that... they might... I think there's a possibility they skew a bit more run-heavy in this game than they did in this past game. Like, Jimmy Garoppolo looked out of his depths last week. He was just bad. He just didn't... Like, he was missing a ton of throws. He was terrible. He was terrible last week. And somehow they only lost that game by 3 points. But, while Jimmy Garoppolo played like garbage. So, yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo, 26th and adjusted completion percentage this past week. Like, for reference, last year, I know he was higher than that. Last year, he was 7th, so his accuracy really fell off of a cliff in that game. Maybe it was just a one-game thing, but even still, he wasn't, like, it's not like he was good. And, like, yeah, he wasn't good. Although that was from a clean pocket. From a clean pocket, he was 26th in adjusted completion percentage, so it's not like the pressure was really affecting him all that heavily when, like, he was just bad. He just wasn't accurate at all. Why does that keep happening? Damn. He was 12th in percentage of dropbacks that were in clean pockets. So, like, Jimmy Garoppolo was bad, and I think we might see a more run-heavy offense from the 49ers, which could go 2 different ways. Either they blow them out because the Jets are bad, or them running the ball, or them going run heavy keeps the Jets in the game, because I think the Jets have pretty boom-bust potential at receiver from a week-to-week standpoint. Like, Brashad Perriman can go off anytime. Denzel Mims could do the same. I think Jamison Crowder got injured, but who was their high target guy? Who... Oh, man, hold on. Let me look at something right quick. I want to see how many targets he had. That could be somebody that's an underrated fantasy option, but it's not like he was 4th in targets this past week. Tied with Calvin Ridley, had 115 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, Crowder is the number 1 guy from a target share standpoint. So if he's available in your league, or if you're just starting your league up, which I don't know why you would be. Come on, man. He's somebody that you probably want to target. Somebody that you might want to target. So I'm going to go with the 49ers. I spent a bit too much time on that game. And we're going to go to the next one, Steelers versus the Broncos. Both of these teams were in the Monday night doubleheader, different times. The Steelers looked better than the Broncos did. The Broncos lost to a team that played like shit the whole game, gave Derrick Henry 30 carries when he was running at like a 3 per attempt for most of that game until he ripped off a couple bigger ones at the end of the game. So, I mean, the Broncos were bad. And, I mean, the Steelers also beat up on an admittedly bad secondary in the New York Giants. So, I don't really know what to think about that, man. Like they beat up on an admittedly bad secondary, and the Broncos just lost to the Titans, who were force feeding Derrick Henry, who was playing like ass that game. But it's not like, I mean, the Broncos did some good things from an execution standpoint on defense. It's not like they stacked the box. Like most of those runs were against dime and nickel defenses, and they were able to bottle them up and run the ball. But their secondary is also potentially pretty bad. Though Fangio is a coach that might be able to elevate what they have there. I think Deontay Johnson, Juju, James Washington, even Chase Claypool, who had an amazing opening day, or amazing in comparison to what I expected him to be. He only had 2 catches, though. Those 2 catches went for 39 yards, 19 yards per attempt, and he had 5.57 yards per route run as he only ran 7 routes, which leads the NFL. So, I mean, and Eric Ebron also was an athletic tight end. Like, they have pretty good weapons. And let me talk about their weapons from a fantasy standpoint. Deontay Johnson had more targets than Juju Smith-Schuster last week. He was tied ninth in targets in the NFL. Me as a Deontay Johnson fantasy owner, it's pretty encouraging because even though he dropped a couple, it didn't shy the Steelers away from targeting him, and it won't shy me away from starting him in some of my leagues. So even though Juju got more targets in the red zone, which are higher touchdown potential than just targets that are in between the 20s. I mean, in like before the red zone. Higher touchdown potential when you're closer to the end zone. Juju got more targets in the red zone, but Deontay Johnson out-targeted him in general, though. So, like, yeah. Anyway, did I talk about the line? I think I talked about this maybe earlier. No. Damn, I can't find it. What the hell? Oh, okay. Steelers are 7.5 point favorites. I think they'll probably cover that line because, I mean, cover the spread because they're bad. I mean, the Broncos are, I think they're bad in the secondary, and I don't think Drew Lock is that good of a quarterback. So I'm going to go with Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers, who Ben Roethlisberger for most of that game also himself didn't look that great, but he finished off the game pretty well. Made some great throws under pressure. Broncos don't have Von Miller, which hurts, even though the value of losing him might be a bit overblown, because in general, the value of one defensive player getting injured is a bit overblown. But yeah, I'm going to go with the Steelers, and I think they'll cover the line at home, which doesn't matter. But cover the spread at home, which doesn't matter. So, which at home doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm going to go with Pittsburgh to beat the Broncos. We have the Jaguars versus the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. Jaguars coming hot off of the win against the Indianapolis Colts, and they are now 9-point underdogs on some sites against the Tennessee Titans. Now, damn, why does it keep happening? I don't see why. Well, the Jags really on a good roster on paper, but it's not as if the Titans just came off of a dominating, excellent performance. I think this is the largest point spread. Oh, never mind. The largest point spread is the Panthers Bucks. This is the second largest point spread of the week. 9 points for the Titans over the Jaguars, which it's not like the Titans just came off of a stellar performance. Like they played pretty shitty against the Broncos, and like they like they weren't like it's not like they played a good game of football in their last game. This line, well, first of all, I don't think they'll cover the spread. I think 9 points is a. But then again, the Jaguars aren't really that good on paper, and the Titans are way better. And 1 week sample size doesn't tell too much about either team, but it just seems odd that they're favored so heavily. Right now, they're both 10 and 11 respectively in EPA per play on offense. The one thing I will say about the Jaguars is that their defense wasn't really great. Like, they made plays, but the Colts really just lost the game. Like, they just made mistakes and stuff. Like, their defense really didn't make a stop. The Colts didn't punt once. So, but, like, the Titans are probably more encouraged to go more run heavy, which could keep the Jaguars in the game because Minshew's a pretty good quarterback and stuff. But then again, I do think if they ran the same volume, they will. Like, if they ran, they'd probably have more success against the Jaguars than they would have against the Broncos. But then again, the Broncos aren't really that great of a defense when you look up and down the roster either. So maybe that's not true. They're like 15 and 16 respectively in EPA per run play. Neither of the two running backs performed too well. Well, Derrick Henry had like 7 broken tackles in a game that ended in like a 3.3 per carry. James Robinson had a 3.7 per carry. Like, none of these guys have efficient running offenses. So the Titans, who love to run the ball, like, I don't know, because I don't like if depends. If they give Derrick Henry 30 carries, there's a chance that the Jaguars win, because why give Derrick Henry 30 carries? It depends on how the game is going, though, because I do think he'll probably have more success against the Jaguars than he did against Denver, but I don't know. Minshew's playing lights out right now. 19 for 20, even though, I mean, he had only 3 of his passes traveled 10 yards in the air, so that's a bit fraudulent. So, but he is the better quarterback coming into this game, even though Tannehill made some pretty good plays under pressure in his game against Denver, but overall their performance was piss poor. So I'm someone who likes their roster, like someone who likes the roster of Tennessee. Like, I wasn't encouraged by their performance, but yeah, Minshew this past week had a 2.19 snap to pass, which is first in a year, but because there's a ton of other people that were getting the ball out quick. Dwayne Haskins 2.13, Cam Newton 2.13, Mahomes 2.17, and then Gardner Minshew at 2.19. They were getting the ball out of his hands quickly against a Colts pass rush, which is pretty underrated, with Justin Houston, now DeForest Buckner. So they definitely help mitigate the effects of a pass rush that is pretty underrated and pretty good. But, see, I don't think they cover the 9.5, because I think that Minshew is too good for that to happen, especially if Derrick Henry gets 40 carries or 30 carries. Because, when he gets 30 carries, it's not like that offense is, the best in the league. It's not like they're putting up big amounts of points. He's just running a lot of yards. And people give the credit to him, even though Ryan Tannehill is playing one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But it is what it is, though. I'm going to try to look to see, dang. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go with the Titans. Because even though, I'm going to go with Tennessee, because I think they're a better all-around team. And the Jaguars could have just had maybe a 1 week sort of I don't know, though. Minshew was still there. Minshew was still really, bro, why does that keep happening? Minshew was still really good, though. No, I'm gonna go with Tennessee, because I mean, they're definitely a better roster top to bottom. Like Clowney, they have a really underrated secondary that didn't look excellent yesterday. I mean, in their past game, but they also didn't look terrible either. I'm gonna go with Tennessee. I'm gonna go with Tennessee against Jaguars over the Jaguars. We have the Packers versus the Lions. The Packers, in which they have Aaron Rodgers on a full-fledged revenge tour for drafting Jordan Love, a quarterback, instead of helping out the quarterback you have. Like, I didn't hate that pick with the foresight of it, but at the same time, it doesn't really make sense to draft. Like, you don't really want to have to be forced into drafting a quarterback when you have to. Like, you want to be ahead of the curve. But at the same time, when you draft a quarterback, when you're potentially superstar level quarterback, you might not have been performing that way, but a quarterback that could be a superstar any given week / maybe year, and Aaron Rodgers, who has 4 years left on his deal, is not a great pick because, you lose the liberties of the rookie contract and what you get to do from a roster standpoint if that guy is coming in on the last year of his deal. Saying that, provided that Aaron Rodgers were to stay all 4 years, which is something that could be not a thing. So, yeah, Aaron Rodgers is playing amazing right now, even though it was against an admittedly bad secondary, but some of the stuff Rodgers was doing was great. So, maybe don't factor in the level of competition as much, just because the throws he was making were really good. But yeah, that's like the closest we've gotten to 2011, that vintage Aaron Rodgers, and he's getting the ball out in rhythm and making some of the special plays, which, I mean, dancing around in the pocket, sort of oddly, and then running out of clean pockets. It's weird. Aaron Rodgers has a pretty odd play style, but yeah. So, I'm gonna, the Lions blew a lead to Trubisky, which probably shouldn't have happened. That's not a good sign for a team. I had pretty high hopes of the Lions, though. I mean, in fairness, they are banged up. So, Jeff Okudah's hurt, Gladney's hurt. I mean, not Gladney, Galladay is hurt. So, yeah, they are dealing with some injuries right now. I think Justin Kollmann is injured too. They are dealing with some injuries and to some pretty important positions. Which means I'm going to go with the Packers here. And I don't think I said it earlier, but they are... Damn, I can't find the spread. Oh, they are 6 points. They're 6-point favorites against the Lions. I think they'll probably cover that too. The Lions are coming in banged up. But then again... they led for 0 seconds against the Lions last season, but this is potentially a different Packers team because Rodgers is playing like Aaron Rodgers and not whatever the hell we saw the last 3 years. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the Packers and the Lions dealing with some injuries. But, I mean, the Lions, it's not like the Lions, it's not like the because I mean, Rodgers, we barely ever see this Rodgers. We see this Rodgers 3 times every 3 years now. So, damn, I don't know, because it's the Lions do things coverage wise that kind of fuck with Rodgers, the man coverage, heavy man coverage. But Rodgers should be fine though. I don't know, cause I'm gonna go with the Packers, and I think they're gonna cover the spread as well. So, on to the next game, which is the Bills versus the Dolphins. Now the Dolphins, I don't know where I started off. Well, I'll start off with the Dolphins. The Dolphins only lost by 10 against a Patriots team that only scored 21 points. I think the Bills are a better roster than that Patriots team, but I think Cam is a better quarterback than Josh Allen. Even though Josh Allen has much better weapons to throw to, I think he has one of, if not the best group of receivers. All 3 are good receivers. But Ryan Fitzpatrick threw 3 interceptions, and they only lost by 10, and the Patriots only put up 21 points. So you think of that, and you think of like the Bills have a worse offense than the Patriots probably because their quarterback isn't that good. But cause damn. Okay, but anyway, I'm gonna go with the Bills. I'm gonna make this quick. I'm gonna go with the Bills, even though I think the Dolphins will make it closer than expected. At least they might not make it close, but the Bills are favored by 5.5. They probably cover, but I see a scenario in which they don't cover. Like Ryan Fitzpatrick threw 3 interceptions, and they were still sort of in that game. They only lost, like, the Patriots weren't that good. They only scored 21 points in a very, very, very run-heavy offense. I'll get to that a bit later. Like, I wouldn't say I don't think that that Fitzpatrick's not gonna throw 3 picks again. That's definitely in the realm of possibility, but also in the realm of possibility is him to also throw like 4 touchdowns and look like the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. So, even that being said, I'm going to make it quick. I think the Bills win, and I think they're going to cover the spread. So, yeah. On to the next game. Did we start the 4 o'clock slate? No, we have one more 1 o'clock game. Vikings versus the Colts in Indianapolis. The Colts, fresh off a loss to the Jags. Vikings, fresh off of a loss to the Packers, in which Aaron Rodgers went ballistic. Now, that was, like I said earlier, mainly due in part to the fact that mainly due to the fact that he's Aaron Rodgers and the Vikings have a shit secondary. So, yeah, it was just a mixture for disaster for them. For some reason, they have Gladney not playing their first-round pick. It's like, was he that damn bad in training camp that you can't have him on the field over some of the guys you have in there? Like, Gladney and Dantzler should be what you have going on the outside for you. When they're not, that's not what they're doing. So, was Gladney really that bad? Is it that concerning? The Vikings are 3-point underdogs. Colts are 3-point favorites, obviously. What did I say the first time? But I don't. It's not like. Damn. I'm gonna go with the Colts. I don't think the Vikings are very good on offense really or defense. They got a lot of their offense on garbage time. They scored 34 points, but a lot of it was like the game wasn't even in question anymore for the Green Bay Packers. So, but even still, in terms of EPA per play on offense, they were like the 4th best team. So. Their offense is fine. The Colts have a bad secondary. This game could be relatively high scoring, even though I don't think the Vikings offense is that good personnel-wise, but whatever. The Colts, they have some... I think I said something about their weapons not being that. I mean, the weapons aren't excellent. And it's not like... I mean, Phillip Rivers just wasn't great. He was barely pressured. He was pressured on like 8% of his dropbacks this past Sunday. So... or 12.8% of his dropbacks he was pressured on, which is a very, very, very low number. And he still wasn't great. He's just making bad decisions with the football. So, I mean, like, the Jaguars are a worse secondary than the Vikings, and they lost to the Vikings. But I'm going to go with the Colts here to beat the Vikings and cover the spread at the same time. So, yeah. Paris Campbell went off. That might be somebody that could be in... That might be someone that could be due for a look at on fantasy on the waiver wire. Paris Campbell. Could be just a 1-week anomaly, but... Adam Thielen. I wanted to get him on almost all my teams. He had 31 fantasy points, most of which came when they were down by like 70. Oh yeah, and the Vikings weren't good for like half the game because they like Kirk Cousins, though he's not a great quarterback, he's still better than running the ball. So the fact that he had like 5 pass attempts at halftime was kind of egregious. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the Colts to win this game, and then we're gonna go on to the 4 o'clock slate, starting off with Washington versus Arizona. Washington coming off of an upset win versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Arizona coming off of what's perceived as an upset win against the San Francisco 49ers, who came into that game super banged up. So, I don't know. Arizona, 6.5-point favorites against Washington at home. Now, home field advantage doesn't really matter, but playing in this extreme 100, it's supposed to be like 100 degrees that game, so that might play an effect. Well, really on both teams if you really think about it, but yeah, the Cardinals weren't that good, though. Like, the Cardinals really weren't that good. And they somehow won the game because the 49ers were worse. So, yeah. This game, the Redskins Washington got 8 sacks last time they played, which I doubt happens against the Cardinals, though their offensive line is worse than the Eagles. Sacks are a bit luck-based in a way. They're more dependent on what the offense is doing. Like, defense in general is more dependent on the offense you go up against. And, like, this is an offense I don't foresee them getting 8 sacks against because they run a ton of screens, and they run a ton of screens and a ton of quick passing and a ton of quick passes, as Kyler Murray had a 2.22 time to throw, average snap to pass, which isn't really enough time to go get a sack. So, I mean, you could really be dominant up front, but if you're getting the ball out in 2.1 seconds, you're not going to show up dominant in the box score. DeAndre Hopkins, from a fantasy standpoint, spectacular. He's getting a ton of targets. He's getting those screen targets more often than he used to, and like he's getting pumped screens like heavy. The Washington has no one to guard. Washington has no one to guard DeAndre Hopkins. Like, absolutely no one to guard DeAndre Hopkins. I still have major questions about the secondary. So, with that being said, I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals, even though their performance wasn't that great themselves. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Arizona. I just don't think Washington is really that good. Yeah, I'm going to go with Arizona. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was terrible. The offense as a whole was terrible. They were like 26th in EPA per play on offense this past week. So, yeah, they were 29th in EPA per play on offense, which isn't a good number. So, yeah, they're a terrible offense, which is more concerning than being a pretty good defense and pretty good pass rush at that. Like, we're just really not that great in the right areas right now. Like, if we can't cover, we're not gonna win. We're not gonna beat too many teams. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with the Arizona Cardinals to beat the Washington Redskins, to beat Washington, and I don't know. They might not cover because I think Washington might make it a bit tough. No, I think they cover. I don't know. I'm going to go with Arizona nonetheless, though, to win this game against Washington. I just don't think Washington's that good. Baltimore versus Houston Texans, which is potentially the game of the week. I don't see anything else that's too enticing on this slate of games. Maybe Patriots Seahawks. I don't know. This is probably the game of the week. Baltimore, who destroyed and dismantled Cleveland. They killed Cleveland. They trounced Cleveland. Texans coming off a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. in the opening day of the NFL season. This game is interesting because I think Baltimore is definitely an overall better roster, but Houston has Deshaun Watson, so they're 7 and 8 respectively in EPA per play. Though I don't have the win probability filters on right now, so that doesn't count that. A good amount of their offense came in garbage time, but at the same token, when you kind of look at how that game went, there was a couple plays that weren't in garbage time when the game was still in question for the Chiefs, where the Houston Texans where multiple passes were dropped, like the back shoulder to Stills, that pass to Will Fuller in the first drive. Like, there was a ton of plays that could have swung the game. Baltimore, they killed Cleveland. Lamar Jackson looks like he's on track for another MVP right now. So, yeah. Oh, okay. So Baltimore are 7-point favorites against Houston. Now, I do have high hopes for Houston this season, though I don't think that will manifest itself here this week because these are games I thought they'd lose. But they looked a bit worse than I thought they would look. Even still, they really weren't that bad, though. There was a ton of, Watson's supporting cast let him down big time. So, you also have to take that into account. Deshaun Watson, guys, had a 9.4% drop rate. 3 passes were dropped. 3 pretty big ones, too. A 9.4 drop rate would have led the NFL last season. There's 3 guys. There's 5 players. There's 5 quarterbacks with an over 9% drop rate from their receivers right now, which would all lead the league last year. So, yeah. The Ravens have a really good secondary with Humphrey, Marcus Peters. But when I think about it, none of those guys can really just match the speed of Will Fuller, though they don't use him like that, and they haven't really played like that. They ran a bunch more short game, quick passing in a way. Watson had a 2.45 time throw, which is well below where he's normally at. He's typically up higher in 2.78 range. They've been making a concerted effort to drop his time to throw in his NFL career. It's dropped almost every year since entering the league. His time throw was dropped every year. Now we don't know if that's going to be a trend this year because they don't really have the personnel for that, and it's only 1 game sample size, and it's only been a 1 game sample size. But yeah, Deshaun Watson, 47% of his dropbacks came in 2.5 seconds or less. There's also those plays where he's dancing around in the pocket, which happened a bit more frequently than the quick stuff. But you need to maximize the guys you have on your team right now. They need to run more longer-ish developing plays. But if Titus Howard is going to play a replacement level tackle, then it really is difficult to run those longer developing plays because the pressure is going to be right in his face the whole time. But you have guys that can get down the field really quickly. So in order to maximize what you have, you will want to play that style of football. Baltimore, on the other hand, I think they win the game. Their run game wasn't good, and they still beat the hell out of the Browns, and their run game wasn't even that damn good. So, just Lamar passing the ball is just as efficient as he was last year, at least in this really small 1 game sample size. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Baltimore to win this game at NRG Stadium. I'm not quite sure if they cover because Watson might keep it close, but yeah, let's go on to the next game. Kansas City Chiefs versus the Los Angeles Chargers at SoFi Stadium. The Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites. I mean, the Chargers almost lost to the Bengals last game, but yeah, they probably deserve to lose to the Bengals last game, but their offense is atrocious. I mean, they still have the pieces in their secondary to be good, and their secondary was pretty solid. It was just okay. It wasn't really as good as I thought it would be. I mean, they're missing probably the cog that's going to make it work. If there is a 1 defensive player that gets injured, that's really going to make a huge, huge difference when he's out is Derwin James, because he fundamentally kind of changes the way they play. Not kind of, like he fundamentally changes the way they play. Like they use Derwin James in multiple different ways. They can't do that with his replacement. So this defense has to work fundamentally different without Derwin James in it. So, like, Derwin James is the defense is missing something, and Derwin James. Kansas City Chiefs Mahomes didn't even play that great of a game. They still had 34 points. Mahomes, he had some of his best throws negated, but he also had, like, an interception at the goal line negated, another interception negated, a dropped interception. He has the lowest ADOT in the NFL right now, which is really interesting. Like, this was sort of like a non-Chiefs-esque game. It's untypical for the Chiefs to have an offense. It's untypical for the Chiefs' offense to perform how it did in, like, the fashion that it did. A bunch of quick passing. Not even really quick passing, but just a bunch of short passes. Well, they did do quick passes too, because Mahomes is third in average time to throw with 2.17. But I don't know, man. Long story short, the Chiefs should beat the hell out of the Chargers and win the game outright. They should probably cover the spread. They might win by more than 8. Mahomes didn't even have that great of a game, and they won. They're 5th in EPA per play, and Mahomes didn't even play his best game. Like, the Chiefs are fine for the future. Like, next game. Probably spent a bit too much time on that too, but next game. We're going to go to the Sunday night football game. Patriots versus the Seattle Seahawks. A rematch of the Super Bowl where Russell Wilson threw an interception on the goal line. The Patriots, they didn't even play all that well against the Dolphins. Like, they only scored 21 points in a super, super run-heavy offense. They passed the ball like 21% of the time, and it was like so much better from like a per attempt, like a per play standpoint. Like, it was like 8 yards per attempt passing and like 4 running. They're 9th in EPA per play, even that being said. But the Seahawks are number 1. And they're passing the football. They're letting Russ cook. And even though, like, I've seen that that might not be happening again, I heard that they might not want to, that they didn't get Carson involved enough, which, sure, you didn't get him involved enough running the ball. He got catches. He had 21 fantasy points in a row. I got him on my fantasy team. He was fine. This team is fine in reality, too. Because, if they're going to pass the ball, this team is definitely a favorite in the NFC, in my opinion, at least. This team, they should beat the Patriots. And the Patriots still have the personnel on defense to be good, but their offense is kind of shaky. Like, I don't think they're going to beat the Seahawks, if the passing Seahawks. Like, if they play like the typical run the ball, all that Seahawks. But I could see a world in which this was just like we're going to pass the ball because the Falcons secondary sucks and Russell Wilson's completing every pass, which is what I've heard. So that's unencouraging, to say the least. But the Seattle Seahawks, if they come out passing, firing, throwing the ball, they should beat the Patriots. Like, I don't see how the Patriots compete with a team that's going to just absolutely drown them out throwing the football. Now, Belichick could have a bigger effect on the Seahawks offense than the Falcons and Dan Quinn do. But at the same time, like, Belichick has struggled with quarterbacks with mobility. It's just like another element that he has to worry about that kind of changes the game. Like, those guys like Deshaun Watson, guys that you have to, like, it just takes away what you can do from a coverage standpoint when you have to worry about the quarterback taking off, like Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson's a better passer than Lamar and Watson. So, and the Patriots defense is worse personnel-wise than they were last year too. So, I'm probably gonna go with Seattle. Seattle is only 4-point favorites. I think they win by more than that if they're passing the ball. Like, if they play the typical Seattle game, it's probably gonna be a 1-point game, just like Seattle games normally go, like a 3-point game. But if they come out and play like they did in Week 1, I think they cover the spread and win relatively easily, even though the Patriots are kind of formidable opponents from a defense standpoint. And I don't know. They didn't impress me that much in week one. Like, maybe just because they were playing the Dolphins and they were up most of the game, but their offense is whatever to me. I on to the last game of the week. New Orleans versus the Raiders are 6-point favorites going into Allegiant Stadium. We'll see it for the first time in action on Monday Night Football. The Saints, I wasn't impressed by the Saints' performance, though they're going to make me eat my words this week. I can tell because the Raiders suck, and the Raiders aren't a good the Raiders can't cover. They give up 34 points to the Panthers, though I do like what the Panthers have weapons wise. Well, I don't know. They have more. They probably have a more explosive offense than the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are 31st in yards per play, 30th in yards per play in the NFL this past season. Right now at least. It's a low sample size. Probably want to stress that. They are 28th in EPA per play on offense. They weren't great on offense last week. And they still won the game because Tampa Bay made some mistakes and they capitalized off them. So, yeah, at least you can say that. But this offense is so one-dimensional. You only have, if this offense is so one-dimensional, though. I'm going to go with the Saints, long story short. I think they'll probably cover because, the Raiders can't cover in the secondary. They're not good there. Damon Arnett wasn't that good. Dan Arnett wasn't really good. Trayvon Mullen isn't good. Their secondary is terrible. And though I don't think the Saints offense is that good, it'll probably look amazing against Oakland. So, yeah, that's just a make it real quick. I might talk about some fantasy right now, though. Henry Ruggs is injured and stuff, but I might talk about some fantasy right now, though. Some quick takeaways I had from week one in fantasy. Probably want to fade all, and in terms of maybe DFS, fade the Browns backfield. They're splitting. They had the same amount of. They have the same percentage of snaps played, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, that is. That's not a backfield I want to touch anymore. I had Nick Chubb as an RB2 on some of my teams, but that's just not something I want to touch anymore. There's too much, it's not even too crowded. There's just two guys. Kareem Hunt had more carries than Nick Chubb this past week, so this isn't encouraging for people that have Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt on their fantasy team. Nick Chubb or both of them are kind of non-viable. But if you think about it though, Kareem Hunt's getting more involved in the receiver game. They use him in the slot a bit more, on obvious pass downs a bit more than they use Nick Chubb. But that can't be good though. In terms of target share and stuff like that, Devontae Adams. He was predicted by many to be. He was by many the number one fantasy option. The number one receiver in fantasy. And he was great this past week. DeAndre Hopkins getting a ton of targets, most of which are on screens, but sure. Amari Cooper had 13 targets. That's nice. Calvin Ridley had more targets than Julio Jones. That might not be a trend, but Russell Gage had 12 targets. That might be a sneaky ad. Will Fuller had 8. So yeah. Oh, let me look at some deep targets. Allen Robinson had 5 deep targets. Deshaun Jackson had 2 deep targets. That's a ton of air yards and more points. Will Fuller was third with 3. Henry Ruggs was third with 3, and he didn't even play the whole game. And Devontae Adams is third as well. So same with Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen is a really good fantasy option. He's going to get volume. He's getting deep targets. He's a guy that I have on all my fantasy teams. Robert Woods had 6 targets, had 105 yards. It's probably not sustainable week to week, even though he might receive more targets the next week. But that efficiency might not be something that he can keep up from week to week. Like I said earlier, Deontay Johnson, more targets than Juju Smith-Schuster, which is really interesting. Though Juju is getting more targets in the red zone, which lead to more touchdowns typically. So yeah, that's just some quick fantasy. some quick fantasy stuff. I want to get more into the fantasy stuff in the podcast. I want to do a bit more fantasy stuff in the predictions, but yeah, that's some quick hitters for fantasy. I might do that. I might do not so quick hitters. Oh, like I said earlier, Jameson Crowder, 12 targets, but yeah. Oh, and Quintez Cephas, while good, Kenny Galladay is injured, had 9 targets, though he only had 3 catches and 43 yards. So, and then another thing, Preston Williams out targeted Devontae Parker. He had 6 targets. Parker had 4. Parker had 4 for 48. Preston had 2 for 41. So just keep an eye on the target share, who's getting the most targets. You also want to factor in the air yards of the target, how far they are down the field. If they're not that far down the field on their targets, you have to worry about how much volume they're going to get, like a Michael Thomas. I've always been a bit wary about him from a fantasy standpoint because he's not getting high air yards and he has to keep up the volume. He has to keep the extremely high volume, which I didn't think was possible this year. I was much lower on Michael Thomas. I didn't think it was possible for him to keep that volume with Emmanuel Sanders as the number 2 receiver there now. And the fact that I didn't think he would get that much volume next year anyway, but when your quarterback can only throw the ball but 5 yards in the air, I mean, Michael Thomas is going to eat for fantasy because he gets open pretty quickly in the short areas of the field. But this is the end of the podcast now. Hope you guys enjoy. Leave a like, subscribe, all that type of stuff. And I'm out. Peace.